one Sunday. It was about 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, and the Rebbitzen called me. And then she said, I'm so sorry to bother you. I have to do something that's completely against my nature, but I have no choice. And I said, Rebbitzen, please, anything. But please, you have to understand, this is against my nature completely. But I have no choice. And she sounded like desperate. I said, what happened? I really got frightened. She says, you see, the nurse that was supposed to come at 8 o'clock did not show up. And I really can manage on my own because I manage now with a walker. But my husband, meaning the Rebbe, will not go to his office, which he every evening he would go after supper, he would go back to his office. He will not go back to his office to leave me alone. And I can't have it that he should stay here because of me. He belongs in his office. He belongs there with the Hasidim. He has to do things for them. I can't take it that he should be home because of me.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. I'm really excited with today's guest. We have with us today Mrs. Esther Sternberg, who we thought would be a great person to interview for this special edition of for Chaf Bei Shvat, which is the anniversary of the yahrzeit of the Rebbitzen, the Rebbe's wife, Rebbitzen Chaya Mushka. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Sternberg.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, so you have so much history and so much information, in of what you've gone through and in your relationship with the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen, and I thought it would be really interesting for our audience to hear a little about it. So first, let's start with your personal relationship with the Rebbe and how the Rebbe really transformed your life.
Well, it's a very interesting story because I grew up in a home where my father, Aleph Hashalom, may he rest in peace, was a seventh generation Chabad Hasid. He was a follower of Chabad all the way from the days of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. And everything in our house was around talking about the Rebbe, the Rebbe, the Rebbe, the Rebbe wants this, the Rebbe said this, the Rebbe will want this, will do this. And I grew up loving something that I didn't even understand myself what it was. I was about 7 years old when I was 6.5 years old when the Rebbe assumed leadership. I heard about him, and then I was very fortunate to go to him just before Yom Kippur. He was giving out a piece of honey cake to people with a blessing for a sweet new year. As a little girl, I went along with my father. I was very much in awe, and I just remember that he was this very wonderful person who smiled so beautifully at me, but I didn't know how I would ever have a relationship with him. As a young girl, I was very fortunate. I had a very wonderful childhood, but for some reason, I was very shy and timid and very insecure. I think it's because my older brother was so brilliant, and I was always feeling that I can't match up to him. And I was a very meek child.
It's hard to imagine you so insecure and so timid.
It's true.
Yes.
And I'm purposely saying it because I want to show you how the Rebbe changed my life completely, but so completely that nobody would believe I'm the same person because I was very, very insecure. And at the age of 16 and a half, I graduated high school because in those days they didn't have cutoff dates to start school. So I started at 5. So I ended up graduating early. And for some reason, the Board of Education that year deemed the high school to only be 3.5 years as opposed to 4 years. So we were graduating at the end of January, and I was going to have nothing to do after graduation. My Hebrew studies, I wanted to continue in a seminary, and that was going to continue, but there was nothing in the afternoon. For the secular studies were finished. So a lot of girls were going to be secretaries in different offices, but my father wanted me to do something more important. So he made a whole plan for me to go to study in Israel. And I would learn to speak Hebrew, and I learned to be a very good Hebrew teacher. And he asked the Rebbe, and with the Rebbe's advice, he planned out my whole trip, which I was too busy to even be involved in. I didn't even know about it because I was so busy doing my graduation, all the regions and everything for graduation. And one day my father said, you're going to Israel to study. And I was so excited because this is many years ago. People did not go to Israel at the time. People didn't even fly at those times. Many people went by boat because flying was something new. And I was just so excited to be in the Holy Land that I didn't even think there might be many other problems being away from home, going to a strange country. Anyway, but I was going and I was very excited. And those days, if you were traveling over the ocean, you had an opportunity to go in for a private audience with the Rebbe to get a blessing for your trip. So one Thursday night, a week before my trip, I went in with my mother and father to visit the Rebbe in his study for a blessing for my trip. And I come in, and the Rebbe's talking to my father, asking him all kinds of questions about how who's going to be in charge of my curriculum, because I was coming in the middle of the year, and all these kinds of questions. And I was just standing on the side. And then suddenly the Rebbe looks at me and said, "How is your plane flying?" And I was flying through England, because those days the plane couldn't fly directly to Israel. You had to stop in another country and continue the next day. And I had a ticket through England. And I told the Rebbe, "I'm going through England." And then the Rebbe said, "And not through France?" So luckily, and I say that almost every day, I thank God that I had the brains at the time to realize if the Rebbe asked me, if not through France, there's something about France that he wants, because I knew the Rebbe knew that France and England are two different countries. So luckily, thanks to my older brother again, I said to the Rebbe, if the Rebbe wants, we could change the ticket to go through France. I had no idea if you could change the ticket. I just knew one thing: if the Rebbe wants something in France, so we'll just change the ticket.
Right.
And
Wow.
and the Rebbe said, "That's exactly what I want. I want you to be my emissary to the school in Yer, that was a suburb of Paris. There is a Beth Rivka school, which is a sister school to the school here, but there's so little communication, because those days they didn't, even a telephone call was exorbitant. So there were no tape recorders, there were no videos, there were none of these ways of communicating. And I would like you to spend a week with the girls there and share with them everything that goes on here." And I was so baffled, because here I am, so shy and so timid. I'm going to go to speak to girls in a high school, and there were seminary girls there, and I'm going to share with them everything that went on here. I couldn't imagine what's going to be. And then the Rebbe went on to say, "There's just one problem." I couldn't even imagine what that was, because I had more than one problem. And he
Right.
said, "They speak French, and I'm sure you don't speak French." So I nodded. I don't speak French. And then he said, they speak Hebrew. They speak Ivrit, actually the Israeli pronunciation. And the Rebbe said, "I'm sure you speak the American pronunciation, Ivris," which is true. That's the way we spoke here, which was very stilted for people that speak the correct way. And I
Right.
was thinking to myself, "Oh, what's going to be here?" The Rebbe said, "I'm going to have to learn how to speak the Ivrit, which is the way the Israelis speak." And I was just thinking inside, how am I ever going to do this? And the Rebbe said he wants me to spend a week with these girls, and I should spend time and make them feel like they're part of the girls here. And then the Rebbe gave me another job, that I should start a girls group of girls of Chabad that should get together once in every few weeks, get together to learn, to have fun as a group of Chabad girls. And they had
Where was that?
this
A
was
group of girls
in Yerushalayim, I'm sorry, in
Yeah.
Yerushalayim. There was
Mm,
not yet established a
mhm.
girls group called Benot Chabad. And the Rebbe said, "I should start it." And I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to do this? And the Rebbe directed me to two people in Israel. He told me, "You should speak to these people. They will help you start it, and you should do it." And then the Rebbe proceeded to give me a gift. And he gave me a siddur. Till this day, of course, I haven't. I use it sparingly, but I remember when I got the gift from him, it was a pocket-sized siddur that just was printed for the first time with Tehillim inside, with the Psalms
Mhm.
inside, because usually the siddurim, the prayer books that we had, did not have Psalms inside. And the Rebbe gave it to me, and he told me that, that we just printed this, and it was something very exciting. I remember coming home with that siddur. My brothers were so jealous of me that I got a gift
Mm.
from the Rebbe. They were like, they didn't know what to do with me. And they
Right.
told me that I should use it every single minute, anytime I say a blessing. And I said, no, 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 I think I should put it away for very holy times. And this was always going on, what I'm going to do with the siddur. They were so
Right.
so I was very lucky to get the siddur. I was very lucky that the
Wow.
Rebbe chose me to be emissary. I was very worried about how I'm going to be able to do it.
So how did that go? What happened when you got to France?
I got to France, and I was so greeted by over 200 girls with so much love and so much excitement that I was just swept
Mm.
away. And I don't know, I started to speak to them. I only had to speak in Hebrew, because they didn't speak any other language. My Hebrew was very minimal, but I just broke my teeth to speak it. They somehow understood me with all the mistakes. And I think that after the whole week of being there, when I came to Israel, I was already pretty fluent in Hebrew because I spent every night talking to them. Nobody went to sleep. They just wanted to hear from me more and more and more. And they were going to school during the day. So I just spoke to them all night long. And I developed very strong friendships with them. I saw their love for the Rebbe, although they never saw him, was stronger even than mine, I could say, because they had absolutely no idea what he looked like, maybe just from a picture. And yet they had such a strong love that I developed a very strong love from him. And because of the Rebbe, and because I spent so much time with them, I somehow lost my fear, and they all looked at me as this very important person. I was probably younger than most of them, but somehow this changed me, and I now am not insecure. I am not shy anymore.
That's incredible how one experience could so change you. And I guess the Rebbe's confidence in you gave you that confidence to
Well, I guess that's what happened.
brought it out.
I guess that's what
Wow,
happened.
incredible. And then you spent the time in Israel for the rest of the year.
So what happened was I stayed in Israel for the rest of the year, and I really was supposed to stay for another year because seminary would have been 2 years then. Except I'm a one and only daughter. I have two brothers, but I'm an only daughter. My mother wrote me such letters of she missed me so much. So it was decided I should come back. But when I came back, the Rebbe really somehow made me feel that I have to do something more, because that year when the Rebbe was giving honey cake before Yom Kippur, as I said, he gives a piece of honey cake with a blessing. At that point, he was only giving it to men because there were so many people that he only gave it to men, like the head of the household, or to the students. And the father, the head of the household, would usually ask for his wife and for his daughters, but the women would not go. And when my father asked for me, the Rebbe said she should come herself. And my father went to a phone booth outside of the synagogue, and he calls me. He says, "Esther, come running." The Rebbe said, "You should come." I said, "How can I come? It's all full of men." He says, "Just come." And when I came, I got such a smile from the Rebbe. He said, "I said you should come yourself." So that just put me in a different place. And I felt very eager to do anything that the Rebbe would ever ask for, if there was any. And very often the Rebbe would say something at a gathering, and he would say we should do something, and I would get people involved. Let's do it. Like if he said it was before Hanukkah, we should go out to make sure that as many people as possible light the Hanukkah candle. I organized groups of people that we also have to do it. And anything that the Rebbe said that should be done, I kept on asking people, well, we have to do it. The Rebbe wants it. And I sort of instigated it already as a young girl until I got married. When I got married,
so the Rebbe really saw your leadership skills.
Right. And then when I got married,
how did your brothers react to that? Were they jealous even more?
Well, my brothers, in their own right, were very studious. They were wonderful. They were studying at that time. And when I got married, I right away jumped into a leadership capacity of the Lubavitch Women's Organization, even though I was so young. But the women, it was a very diversified group, and I was very active in that. And the Rebbe knew that too. So I just was spurred on with a feeling that I know that the Rebbe wants things to be done, and it has to be done.
Wow, incredible. I know you also have a very special relationship. You had a special relationship with the Rebbitzen. Can you tell us a little about that, the Rebbe's wife?
Well, the Rebbe's wife actually knew my father very, very well from when he was a young child, for two reasons. One of the reasons is that the family were very close all the years. My father's family always lived very close to where the Rebbe lived at the time. And when the Rebbe, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, lived in Rostov, in Russia, my father lived right there as a young boy. Rebbe Chaim Mushka knew him when he was a young boy and knew him growing up. His mother was a very good friend of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe's wife. And because of that, everybody in the family knew my father's family. My father's sister and brothers, whenever they would come to America, they would visit Rebbitzen Chaim Mushka because she knew them also very well from Russia. And
where were they living?
They lived in Israel, but they would come at least once a year. And when they came, they always went to visit her. And they were she was very interested to know everything about the family, their families in Israel, and she was very interested in knowing everything about my father's family here. So my father told her a lot about his children, about his life, and a lot about me because I'm this one and
And
only
you're
daughter.
just for the audience, your father's name and his family's name is?
My father's name was Rabbi Schneur Zalman Gurari, the Gurari
Mhm.
family. As a matter of fact, his first cousin was a brother-in-law of Rebbitzen Chayimushka. His first
Mm.
cousin was married to her older sister. So that was also another reason why they were close, because in those days in Russia, if you were related through marriage, it made you sort of
Right.
cousins, so to speak, and there was a very strong relationship. So Rebbe Chaim was always asking about the children and what they're doing, and my father was very proud of me because I'm this one and only daughter,
Mm.
and a lot of you know that fathers love daughters very much, so he knew that. And I had occasions to speak to her 2 times as a girl, uh, because my father was not well and I needed something from the Rebbe. And she treated me so specially that I think we developed a friendship. But so it was a very deep, I was very in awe of her, and I really felt so. I'm going to tell you a short story to show you how this great woman, uh, she was such a great woman, and yet she was so special to me as a little girl. I was
Mm.
14 years old, and my father was sick, and it was a day that it was a holiday. It was Shmini Atzeret, and it was also on Shabbat. And a doctor deemed him to have a serious infection, that his life was in danger, and told him that he must go to the hospital right away. My father never did anything without asking the Rebbe for a blessing. And because it was too early for the Rebbe to be in the synagogue, so my father told me to go to the house to ask the Rebbitzen, to ask the Rebbe if he should go to the hospital, because he would not go
Mm.
without the doctor, without the Rebbe, I'm sorry. And when I went, I actually was knocking on the door. It's a day that you're not allowed to ring the bell. But because my father's life was in danger, and it turned out that he did have, at that time, a serious septic infection,
Mm.
I was told I should ring the bell because nobody's answering the door, and we have to get my father to the hospital. And I saw that I woke up the Rebbe when she opened up the door. I saw that I woke her up, and I saw on her face that I actually disturbed her so terribly that I was too shy to even say what I have to say, because I said she's standing on her feet
Mm.
and I just woke her up. So I made a very short message. Instead of saying that a doctor came and he has this and this problem, etc., I just said, my father is so and so. He has to go to the hospital, and he won't go without a blessing from the Rebbe. So she said, just a minute, I'll go ask my husband. I didn't realize she had to go up a flight of stairs. And she comes
Mm.
down and she says, my husband said, you should go to ask Dr. Zelickson. He was a religious, a Hasidic doctor in the community. But my mother had not called him because he lived very far, and she didn't want him to desecrate Shabbat. So she called a different doctor that lives around the corner from us. So
Mm.
I, being just 14 years old, not understanding that the Rebbe said, go to this doctor, that's what we should have done. I said, oh, but we already had a doctor, as if to say that maybe the Rebbe
Mm.
thinks that it was us children that wanted to go. So I said to the Rebbitzen, but we already had a doctor. We had Dr. Merritt, and he said he should go to the hospital, as if to say, why do I have to go to Dr. Zelickson? I didn't realize at the time I was making a very big mistake. And so she said, so just a minute, I will ask my husband again. And she had to go up
Mhm.
the steps again. And she came down and she said, my husband said, meaning the Rebbe, if so, he should go. And I was so thankful that he could go to the hospital. I just said, thank you so much, Rebbitzen. And I'm so sorry that woke you up. I ran home to tell my father. I was so excited he could
So
finally go.
what was this in the middle of the night when you
This
knocked
was
on her door?
this was 8:30 in the morning, but the
8:30 in the
night
morning.
before was a very late night. It was the night
Mm.
before we had Hakafot, and it was very
Mhm.
late, so she probably went to sleep very, very late. I
Right.
came
And
home.
about how long ago was this? Like, how old was the Rebbitzin at the time, would you say?
Well, this happened, if I'll tell you, it happened probably in 1958. She was born in 1901.
Mhm. Okay.
And what I'll tell you why I'm telling the story is because my father, when he heard that the Rebbe said we should go to Dr. Zelickson, he said, just a minute,
Mhm.
we have to go to Dr. Zelickson. And I said,
Mm,
but, and he doesn't want to hear any but, because the Rebbe said,
mm,
the Dr. Zelikson. And I said, but the Rebbe already said you could go to the hospital. And he later told me how stupid I was, that I didn't realize if the Rebbe said
mm,
something, you listen to him and you don't say, but whatever.
mm,
Uh, the end of the story was that some miracle happened. Dr. Zelikson said we should wait until Shabbat is over, so that not to desecrate Shabbat. He doesn't think a few hours is going to make a difference. And somehow, miraculously, my father had a kidney stone that caused this whole problem. The kidney stone passed, which was a miracle in itself,
mm,
because it was a tremendous kidney stone. And the infection went away, and he never went to the hospital. But that's not the
mm,
part of the story I want to tell you. What I want to tell you is that 2 days later, she called up. Rebbitzen called my mother, and she asked how my father's feeling and all that. And then she said, "I really want to tell you I'm calling you because I think that your daughter thinks that you woke me up. And she feels very bad
mm.
that you woke me up. But I want to tell her she didn't wake me up. And I want to tell her I was so happy to meet her, to see how she grew up. Please convey to her that I was so happy to meet her. And I don't want her growing up with a feeling that she did something negative." And I was just
Wow.
thinking to myself, such a great woman. Rebbitzen is such an important person, and she's worried about a 14-year-old girl feeling bad that you woke her up, when I really did wake her up. I know I
Mm,
woke her up, but she didn't want
right.
me to feel bad and go on my life worrying about that. So I always tell the
Wow. How
story just to show how she cared about a young girl, you know,
right. So
so
sensitive
sensitive.
that she right. Wow, that's incredible. Really incredible. And then I understand you had more with the Rebbitzin as well.
Well, there were various things that sometimes my father would send me over to do something, to give her something. She knew me very well. We would bring her for Purim. We would bring her gifts for her birthday. Brought her gifts. So either I went or my daughters went, or I brought my children with me. And there were times I spoke to her on the phone, because she was very, very involved. Actually, when I was getting married, she was very involved in my wedding, because there were certain customs that she kept that were part of customs of the home of the Rebbe, of the previous Rebbes. And she, for some reason, wanted me to continue with those customs. Um, it's very interesting why she chose me, because I wasn't the only girl in Crown Heights, in this neighborhood. I wasn't the only girl in the Hasidic family, but she chose me, and she called my parents that she wants to go over certain traditions that she wants me to keep, that she kept, and she wants me to continue with those traditions. So we actually
Mm,
had a meeting with her, my parents and I, and she told me what those traditions were, because they were different. She tried to make it easier, and she invited me the next day to her house to show me pictures of her wedding, to see how it looked at her wedding, so it shouldn't be so difficult for me. I remember being alone with her in her house. She showed me her wedding album. I was just 18 years old, 18. And I was alone, and I was in such awe of being in the Rebbe's house myself, without my parents. And
right.
but she was so gracious, and she was so sweet. And it was something about a headpiece. It should not be a certain fabric, and that should be a certain. And she said, "I'll make the headpiece for you." And I just looked at her, and she's not a seamstress, and she just told me what to do, and she was going to make the headpiece for me. She was just so loving and so caring. And I was so surprised, because she was this very important lady, and she did know how important she was, because she knew that the whole world is adoring the Rebbe, and because we love the Rebbe so much, we would love her. Yet
Mhm,
she was a very, very, she was a woman that did not want all this attention. She was very simple in her own life, and she didn't want all this adulation. And because of that, so few people ever met her. She was very happy to be at home, or to be in the sidelines or in the back, that we should not see her, because she didn't want all this attention. She
mm,
was, I don't even know how to describe it, because she knew we would have done anything for her. We would have bent down to shine her shoes for her. And
mm,
yet she would never want any of that.
mm.
So it was just very, I was very excited every time I did see her, because she treated me very specially. That was,
Why do you think she chose you? Why do you think she chose to
I
treat you so
have,
specially?
honestly, people ask me today, I mean, this is so many years ago, I'm married, thank God, over 61 years. And people ask me this, I really don't have an answer why she chose me. Perhaps she was looking for a family that's going to want to keep these traditions. And she knew that my father would do it. That's the only answer I could have, that she knew my father was going to do it. And of course, if she'll ask for something, we'll do it. So we did it, and we do it, and our children follow, and our grandchildren follow. And people ask us, well, how come she didn't tell anybody else? And I don't have the answer. I'm sorry.
Wow, incredible. Incredible. So how did you feel about that special treatment that you were given?
I was very honored. I was very honored. And I know that she wanted to know if we actually did everything right. And she asked for a copy of those days we didn't have videos yet. It was a reel to reel movie, and I had to send a projector over to her house that somebody should show her. She wanted to see everything the way it looked. You see, she would have loved to come to the wedding, but she knew if she would come to the wedding, she would have so many people surrounding her and kissing her and blessing her. And she didn't want that. She was so humble. So she didn't come. She would have come. She was so close to my father, so close to, and she loved my mother very much. And she would have come, but she held herself back because she really did not want this adulation.
And when she showed you the album that she had, her wedding anniversary album, what was there anything that stood out there that you
Well, actually, she
remember?
only showed me the pictures of her gowns. See, I don't know if this is important for this. She told me that her father did not let her wear a white gown because at that time, non-Jews were wearing white, and he said that Jewish girls should not wear white. So it had to be a different color. And she showed me her albums because she has 3 separate gowns at her wedding. She told me that she had 3 separate parts to the wedding. The first was the reception, and she had 1 gown for the reception. And after the ceremony, after the chuppah, she changed into another gown, and there was another reception for many people that she put on the second gown. And then there was the meal that started first at 12 o'clock midnight in a big hotel in the center of town in Poland. And she put on a third gown for that. So she just showed me the 3 different gowns to show me that they were different. They were colored. They were not white. Even though,
What colors were they?
so I'll tell you, even though it was a black and white album, but she showed me the first one and she told me it's light blue lace. And the second was silver lace. And the third one was a beige, a deep beige, very beautiful beige lace. And then she looked at me at some point and she said, I think you would look beautiful in ice pink. And I gulped. I never heard of a
Wow.
bride in pink. Well, lo and
Right.
behold, I got married in pink. My daughters got married in pink. And it was beautiful. And I found out that there are other
Wow.
people that had that custom too. But she actually
Isn't
helped
that
me
interesting?
with the gown. She was very involved with the gown and with the headpiece and everything.
Wow, incredible, really incredible. Later on when she became ill, were you also involved
Well,
there?
that's much later, but in between, when I got
Yeah.
married until much later, I had started, when the Rebbe started a campaign that we should reach all the Jewish women and girls to light Shabbos candles. The Rebbitzen was very proud of me that I took this campaign into my hands, and everything I did, she wanted to see. Whatever
Really?
we produced a brochure to explain to people. Whatever it was we did, she wanted a copy of it, and she would speak to me on the phone. She heard every time I had a baby, she heard, and she was involved, and she wanted to know what's going on. And she always said, "You're very busy with your children, but please send it over. I should see it." So I didn't visit her as often as she just asked me to bring things to her, and I spoke to her on the phone mostly. And she was very proud of what I was doing. She was very proud in general of what the followers of the Rebbe were doing, because at that time many people were going out to different cities to start Jewish education project, or to start a house for where people could come, what we call a Chabad house, where they could invite them for the holidays, or to start a shul for them. And people would go very far away. And she was very proud of these people who went. She worried about them because many people went to places where it was hard to get kosher food. They had to import it. And she was very involved in everything. So she was very proud of what I was doing with the candlelighting campaign. And she kept urging me, and and I knew that I'm doing it for the Rebbe, but I was also showing her everything, and she was giving me her opinion. So I spoke to her a lot, and there was a time
Wh
that
what were those conversations like when you spoke to her?
Well, she would very often ask me who helped me design this, how did I do it? And there was a time that the Rebbe asked me to produce a book because I had gotten compositions, short writings that girls wrote in a school. A teacher asked the girls to write how they feel about lighting Shabbat candles. And she sent me about 50 such entries. Girls wrote little compositions. And they were very, very cute little girls, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, wrote about their experiences. So, of course, I sent it to the Rebbe because it was his campaign and I wanted him to see how the children are enjoying lighting the Shabbos candles. And the Rebbe told me to make a book that we should be able to show people read the book and see how young children actually enjoy this. And the Rebbe directed everything about the book, what it should look like, who should be included, what ages, and everything the Rebbe was directing me. And she asked me who chose there were different colors and the color scheme and who chose this. She was so involved and she kept on urging me with her blessings and saying she had a very interesting way of telling me she's very impressed. Um, Actually, it's interesting. A lot of people at that time spoke Yiddish, the Yiddish language, with the German words. And my mother came from Vienna, so my mother used a lot of these words. And I don't know where the Rebbitzen got it from, but she used the word unberufen, which is German for what we would say today when you see a little child. You want to say, "Oh, that child is so sweet," and you would say like "bli ayin hara," there should be no evil eye or something. So there's a word in Hebrew, unberufen means it shouldn't be spread out loud, but as if to say, "Oh, this is so beautiful." It's like really, and she would always compliment me. "Oh, berufen. Oh, that was so special. This is so special." And of course, she made me feel very good. And I think the nature of a person is that the more you do something that's appreciated, the more you want to make people appreciate it. So you want to do more. So I was very spurred on by that. Then there was a time that the Rebbe had asked my father to do him a favor that if the Rebbitzen would ever need any medical attention, he should be in charge of it because my father had connections with a lot of big doctors. That's a different story, and the Rebbe somehow trusted my father, and he said if she'll ever need anything medically, my father should be in charge. So I helped my father in certain things. So I'll give you an example. When those days, if you went to the doctor, you had to fill out a form like for insurance to pay. So she would fill out write the form. She would sign them and give it to me, but I would take care of sending it for her. But I'll just tell you a story that I witnessed. I can't tell you what year this was, but the Rebbitzen complained to my father that she had a serious problem with the eye, a very serious problem, and she feels she has to go to a specialist. So of course my father was going to look for the biggest specialist in New York because after all it's the Rebbitzen. And my father had a very good friend. There was a very big doctor at one of the major hospitals in New York, and he used to consult with him whenever he needed a doctor. And he told him who's the biggest ophthalmologist in Manhattan. And my father called up to make an appointment for her, and they said there are no appointments for the next 6 months. So my father said, "I'm sorry, but we need an appointment for this woman." And I'm sorry, you have to wait 6 months. This doctor is he's very, very busy. Well, my father went and took his car and drove from Brooklyn to Manhattan, went to the doctor's office. He double parked the car because he was just going to be there for 5 minutes. He told the secretary as he came into the office, "I must speak to the doctor for a minute." And she said, "Well, he's busy writing notes about his patients. You can't go in." He said, "Just for a minute." And my father was a very forceful person. He said, "I'm just going to go for a minute." And he actually knocked on the door, and the doctor looked up at him and he says, like, "Who is this?" The man with a white beard. And he said, "Doctor, I need an appointment for the most important woman in all of New York." And the doctor said, "Well, exactly who is this most important woman in all of New York?" And my father said, "The Lubavitcher Rebbe's wife." And the doctor was like in shock because when you say the most important woman in all of New York, you probably mean the first lady, the mayor's wife, or the governor's wife, whatever it is. And here he says the Lubavitcher Rebbe's wife. And the doctor was so taken aback. He said, "You know what? I'll see you tomorrow morning."
Oh, wow.
And my father got an
Incredible.
appointment for tomorrow morning. And they went there the next day, my father with her. And the doctor saw that she had to have a certain procedure done. And he said, there are two different ways of doing it, and you should decide which procedure to do. Both of them have a risk, but you have to have one of these two procedures. Go home and you decide, and when you come back tomorrow to the hospital, whatever procedure will be ready to do it. So she thanked the doctor very much. My father thanked the doctor. They go back into the car. So my father says, Rebbitzen, now we have to ask the Rebbe, which procedure? She says, oh, no, I don't want my husband to know that I have a problem. So my father said, but Rebbitzen, everybody in the world comes to ask your husband for the best advice of what they should do, and they listen to his advice. Don't you think we should get the best advice? She says, but I don't want my husband to know that I'm suffering. And my father said, but I cannot do anything without the Rebbe because I never do anything without the Rebbe. She says, I don't want him to know. So my father said, well, who's going to decide which procedure? And she said, I will do whatever you tell me. And my father said, I don't do anything on my own without asking the Rebbe. How can I decide for you? And she wouldn't let him ask the Rebbe. My father came home. I remember, this is so long ago, yet I remember it like today. He sat down and he could not talk. He was so beside himself, he doesn't know what to do. He can't decide, especially if it's an eye. An eye is
such a responsibility,
and yet she doesn't want to ask the Rebbe. And he couldn't even talk. And I said, what happened? And he couldn't talk about it. And finally, my father gets up, gets dressed, just like a chassid gets dressed before he writes a letter to the Rebbe. You get dressed in your formal clothing, you wear your hat, and they wear a special belt. And he sat down and he wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And he said to the Rebbe, I have a problem that I do not know what to do. Your wife has a problem with her eye and she does not want you to know about it. And she wants me to decide what treatment, and I cannot do anything without your advice. Please tell me what to do. He went to the headquarters, to the Rebbe's office, gave the letter, and within 2 minutes he had an answer that she doesn't have to know that the Rebbe is involved, and my father should please describe the two different procedures, and the Rebbe will decide which. My father wrote down the two different procedures, and the Rebbe pointed to one of them, and the next day, my father called her up on the phone, and he said, I decided you should have this procedure, and she was so happy. When they went the next day, he never told her that it was the Rebbe's advice, and it happened to be the kind of procedure that you didn't even need a bandage. And she came home with no bandage, and she never told the Rebbe about it, and the Rebbe never spoke to her about it, and as far as she was concerned, he never knew about it. But this is the way she tried to protect the Rebbe. That was the Rebbitzen.
That shows such love for and respect for both of them. You know, that respect and not wanting to make the other one suffer in the slightest. Knowing how much their pain would cause she knew how much her pain would cause the Rebbe, and the Rebbe knew what, so that's an incredible story that really teaches us so much.
Well, I have a few such stories, actually. There was a time that she broke her hip. That was in 1983. And unfortunately, because of other medical conditions, she was not able to have a hip replacement. And it was very, very scary that she was going to have to suffer. They said it'll take about 2 years till it heals on its own, but there's no way they could do surgery. And when she came home, the Rebbe wanted, of course, she should have nursing care 24 hours a day. And I was in charge of the nursing care because I was the one to do it. It was actually my father, so I helped my father. And I hired this agency, and I vetted the nurses. They had to come to me. I had to see who was fitting to work in a house like this, where the Rebbe would be and how they would treat the Rebbitzen properly. And I made up with them that there is no way that they can miss a shift if they feel they will not be able to come. They have to let somebody know. They have to prepare somebody to be instead. And everything went perfectly for the whole year. And over a year was probably 15, 16 months. There was never a glitch. Every single 8-hour shift, they came on time, and it was perfect. Until one day, one Sunday, it was about 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, and the Rebbitzen called me. Now, I was very shocked because the Rebbitzen and I spoke a lot on the phone, but when I knew she was in pain from the hip, I didn't call her. I figured I can't bother her. Maybe I'll call her. She just took a nap. I didn't call her. And when she called me, I was like in shock. Why is she calling me? And then she said, I'm so sorry to bother you. I have to do something that's completely against my nature, but I have no choice. And I said, Rebbitzen, please, anything. But please, you have to understand this is against my nature completely. But I have no choice. And she sounded like desperate. I said, what happened? I really got frightened. She says, you see, the nurse that was supposed to come at 8 o'clock did not show up. And I really can manage on my own because I manage now with a walker. But my husband, meaning the Rebbe, will not go to his office, which he every evening he would go after supper, he would go back to his office. He will not go back to his office to leave me alone. And I can't have it that he should stay here because of me. He belongs in his office. He belongs there with the Hasidim. He has to do things for them. I can't take it that he should be home because of me. I said, but I know it's Sunday, and on Sunday, the nurses that are not working are probably out having a good time. I don't know if you're going to be able to find somebody, but maybe you can find somebody so that my husband could go to 770. And I said, Rebbe said, I really don't know what I could do. I'm going to try. She says, I'm so sorry to bother you, but please see if you could do something. And I didn't think I would reach anybody on Sunday. So I called the nursing agency and I made up this story that there's a big emergency, that the patient is very weak, and the nurse didn't show up, which was true. The nurse didn't show up, but she wasn't weak. But I just had to say something to get a nurse. You must get me a nurse. So they said, how are we going to reach this days before cell phone? How are we going to reach anybody if they're not home? I said, just try. Well, what's interesting is they called me back 15 minutes later. They could not reach anybody. But one nurse did answer, but she said she lives too far and it was raining outside. And I quickly thought, how do we get her? She doesn't want to come. I need her. So I said, ask her if we send her a limousine, will she come? So they said, you're going to send her a limousine? I said, I'll send her a limousine if she's going to come. And guess what? She heard a limousine. She's coming. And
wow.
I promise you, I paid $100. That's in 1983. And we sent her a limousine. And the Rebbe was able to go to 770 to his office to be with the Hasidim where the Rebbitzen knew he wants to be.
Wow. That's really incredible.
There's another very interesting story that I'll make it very short.
You can keep telling us. We have all night long.
During her time in the hospital, that very first day that she came to the hospital the night before, and that very first day she was in a lot of pain, and that's when they decided they cannot do surgery. And the doctors were in and out looking for different type of medication to give her pain and to make her more comfortable. And she was really suffering terribly. And that day happened to be the fast of Tisha B'Av, where we were all fasting. And my father was in the hospital, of course, and I was there to help him because he was not such a young man and he was fasting. So, and somehow the day went by. We didn't realize the day's going to be over. We don't have any food with us. We have to break our fast. So we called to Brooklyn, and we were in Manhattan. We called Brooklyn. Somebody should bring us food. And we broke our fast there when it was nighttime. And suddenly there was a phone booth that we occupied. We kept it like as a private. The phone booth was right in the visitor's room. And we took over the whole visitor's room as if it's just for us. And the phone rang. It was the Rebbe's secretary saying that the Rebbe's coming to visit his wife in the hospital. And I became so hysterical. The Rebbe in the hospital. I never saw the Rebbe anywhere except in shul or when he went to the resting place of his father-in-law. And as the grave. And I figured, what's going to be here? So I realized that there were signs all over that said no visitors after 8 o'clock. And the Rebbe was first going to come about 10:30. So I realized I have to see if I'm going to get permission for the Rebbe to come. So I went down and I met a very lovely guard and he gave me a pass and he said, no problem. And then I went upstairs to the Rebbitzen's room. And I called out the nurse. I would never go into her room because she always was dressed beautifully and looked beautiful when I saw her. And when she was laying in bed in so much pain, I was sure she would not be happy that I should see her that way. So I never walked into her room when I was in the hospital. I called out the nurse and I said, please tell her that her husband's coming to visit. And I went back to the visiting room. A few minutes later, the nurse comes out and she has tears in her eyes. And I said, what happened? She said, I never met a woman like this. I told her that her husband is coming. And she said, oh, please, could you find somebody that has makeup? I think I'm very pale and I don't want my husband to see how pale I am. Could you see if somebody could give you some makeup to put on me and to put on lipstick so I should look better? I don't want my husband to see me suffering. The nurse said, I never saw anything like this.
Wow.
Usually when a visitor comes, the patients start crying, oh, I'm in so much pain and it's so difficult.
Right.
And this woman wanted to make a charade as if she's in a spa.
Wow.
So this just
Wow.
showed you how the Rebbitzen cared so much to look beautiful so that you could not tell that she's suffering, although she suffered so
Mm.
much.
Wow. Really a tribute to the strong connection between them.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Unbelievable.
yes.
Unbelievable. Wow. That's really something special. Just, these little nuggets of stories that
So I have to
just
tell
are
you, okay,
say so much. Yeah,
I'll
go
tell you
ahead.
a story that's just to show you how she understood people so well. Um, I knew a certain gentleman that lived in Florida. He was a doctor. He was a plastic surgeon, actually, and he had a little hobby that he had a garden of very special different fruits, very exotic fruits in his garden. And he used to tell the Rebbe about his garden. And when he came to New York, he would always stand online at the Sunday dollars that people know about. The Rebbe would give dollars to people with a blessing on Sunday. And the Rebbe would always give an extra one for his garden because he was very
Mhm,
involved with his garden. One year, he was coming to New York just before Purim, and he decided he's going to bring some of these fruits for the Rebbe as a present.
mm,
So he had a basket, and he himself brought it to the house, rang the bell, and a lady answered the door, and she said yes, and she says, "This is a basket of fruit for the Rebbe and his wife from Dr. Schuster." So the lady said, "Just a minute." And she goes to take a tip, and she comes back to give him a tip. And he says, "Oh, you don't have to give me a tip. I am Dr. Schuster myself." So she said, "Oh, you're Dr. Schuster? Would you like to come in?" And he said, "Well, who are you?" She said, "I'm the housekeeper." And he said, "Oh, I'd love to come in." And he came in and he sat down, and she asked him so many questions about his family. And he went on to say that he wishes that he could give a message to the Rebbe's wife. He has a beautiful house in Florida that's completely surrounded by trees. And if the Rebbe and his wife would come for vacation, the Rebbe would have a secluded area where he could have a rest in Florida, the warm weather, and nobody would bother him because it's so secluded. Could you please tell the Rebbe's wife that I'm giving my heartfelt invitation for them to come? And she said, "Yes, I will." And he was so effusive that he wanted so much for the Rebbe to take him up on that. And the Rebbitzen asked a few questions of his family, and then he got up to go. He walked out with such a wonderful feeling. He was in the Rebbe's house. He met this lovely housekeeper. He walks out. He said he was whistling when he met somebody on the street. And he said to this man, "Could you tell me where did they find such a lovely woman to be a housekeeper in the Rebbe's house?" So this man, who was a Hasid who lived on the block, he knew what goes on in the Rebbe's house, and he did not know that there's any housekeeper that's such a
mm.
lovely woman that he should be so surprised
Right.
about. So he says, "Well, what did she look like?" So Dr. Sousa describes her as very short, blonde, with a very strong Russian accent, but a perfect English. So this man said, "I think you're describing the Rebbe's wife." So
Right.
he says, "What?" But she says she's a housekeeper. So this Chassid said, "Yes, she keeps the Rebbe's house. She's the housekeeper." She knew that if she would say that she's the Rebbe's wife, he wouldn't be able to talk. He wouldn't be able to walk in. He
Right.
would be so in awe. So she didn't want him to be nervous, and she wanted to hear about him because she must have heard from her husband about him, and she wanted to meet him. So she invited him in. And if he would know who it was, he
Mm,
wouldn't have been able to come in. That's what she
right.
understood about people. I remember that I used to go with my firstborn children, are girls, and before their wedding, each one had an opportunity to visit the Rebbe in her house to get a blessing before the wedding. And we came with the groom, the bride and the groom, my husband and I. Every time we made an appointment to come, she gave an appointment for about 2 weeks later. She never said, "Okay, come next day or tomorrow or 2 days." It was always like 2 weeks later. And I never realized why. Finally, I found out why. Because she wanted to find out who the boy is, the groom, because she knew that the boys are going to be very very uncomfortable. They're going to be very much in awe. They're going to be nervous. And she wanted to put them at ease. The girls she knew my daughters, but she didn't know the boys. And she knew that they're going to be so nervous that if she knows about who they are, maybe something about the family, she'll start a conversation with them and make them feel comfortable. So I remember we came in with the first son-in-law, and right away she starts saying, "Oh, I understand your grandfather and this. I knew your grandfather's father." Something she had done research, and she made him feel so much at home. And once she saw he was at home, she went on to talk to us. It was so interesting. This happened. I have 4 daughters, and this happened each time that she would address the groom first because she wanted to put him at ease. And once he was comfortable, she would make us drink tea and eat some cake and have some fruits. But all that after the groom was comfortable.
Incredible.
She realized how people would feel in her presence.
Right. She was very attuned to people and what they felt.
Very much.
And very sensitive to their discomfort. Wow. It's really incredible.
I have something very special to share that she taught me that this is 43 years ago. And I try to tell this to people because I think it was so profound. Well, there's a whole story background. I was expecting a baby, and the first time having a cesarean, which I knew I'm going to have. And my parents were vacationing in Europe, and they were going to come back just a few days before I had the baby. I'm a one and only daughter, as I mentioned before, and my father was very, very involved with everything in my life, and I'm going to have an operation. That was to him something really terrible. And just at that time, something exciting was happening in the community, or actually the general Lubavitch community, that the Rebbe commissioned a Sefer Torah to be written, a Torah scroll, should be written for children all over the world, children that are under 12, girls under 12 and boys under 13, that belong to an organization called Sivot Hashem. It's a children's army of Hashem, actually, they're called. And the Rebbe wanted a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll to be written, where children from all over the world can purchase a letter to be part of this Torah. And when my father heard the Rebbe speak about this Torah scroll being prepared, he got very excited, and he suggested to the Rebbe that he would like to buy a gold crown for this particular Torah. And he asked the Rebbe if he could buy this crown, if he could do it, and the Rebbe said yes. And the Rebbe actually instructed that he wants the crown to be a replica of a crown that is used in the main synagogue in 770. The one in 770 is a silver one, and the Rebbe wanted it to be exactly the same replica in gold. So I remember my father taking the silver crown, bringing it to the company that was going to make it in gold. And there was a lot of excitement, and the crown was finished. But the Torah wasn't finished yet. It takes about almost a whole year to write a Torah, and the crown was earlier. Anyway, the crown was finished, and we put it into a bank vault because it could have been stolen. Very, very expensive crown. Just when my father was in Europe, I got a phone call from the Rebbe secretary that they're looking for my father because the Rebbe wants my father to be the emissary to bring the crown to Israel. He should be the one to bring it. Since he made the crown, he should bring it. So I called my father to Europe, and he said, "But how can I go to Israel if you're having a baby?" I said, "Listen, my husband is here, and I'm not afraid of the surgery." But his heart was like, "It is. What's going to be? He's going to leave me." So, of course, he was going to go because if the Rebbe is sending him, there's no question. But it was very hard for him. And he had spoken to the Rebbitzen, even though he was in Europe, he called her every day to ask how she was. He used to speak to every day, at least once a day. He must have said something to her that it's so hard for him to go to Israel. It's so difficult that he's going to be leaving me. And he must have said something, which I don't know for a fact. I just know because of after the fact, as soon as I had the baby, somehow the Rebbitzen knew that I had the baby. I don't know who told her. And she called my home to ask who's taking care of the little children. And she was talking to my daughter, giving her advice, like how is she going to manage with the younger children. Then she called me to the hospital, and she called me twice a day to ask me how I'm doing and if the nurses are nice to me and how I'm all the questions that I like, as if she would be my mother. And I realized that she felt that because my father's not here, my mother's not here, that's what she felt. But what's the most interesting part of the story is that on the third day after the child was born, that day was the 20th day of the Hebrew month of Av, which is the yahrzeit of her husband's father, our Rebbe's father. And traditionally, the Rebbe would have a fabregan, which is a gathering with all the Hasidim, and he would speak about things about his father, and he would give us a lot of very important insights. And this fabregan, as I say, this talk with everybody, lasted for a few hours, and it was something that people all over the world wanted to hear. So there was a system set up that somebody set up a communications room where they got from the telephone company, I don't know how many telephone lines, and people were able to pay monthly for this telephone line. And whenever the Rebbe was going to give a talk, you would call into your number and you would be hooked up to the Rebbe's microphone. We called it a hookup. And on that afternoon, that in the evening was going to be this Fabregan, the Rebbitzen said, Esther, tell me, are you going to be able to hear the Fabregan tonight? I said, Rebbitzen, I happen to have a hookup number. She says, oh, that's wonderful. And I want to suggest to you that you take your baby into your bed and put the phone between your ear and the baby's ear. I was so shocked because I never believed that a 3-day-old baby could hear, let alone hear a Fabregan. And you have to understand a Fabregan is in Yiddish with Hebrew words. It's very high lessons in Hasidut that most people don't even understand without delving into it. And how she's telling me that my 3-day-old baby should hear the Rebbe talk. So I said, I'm going to do that. She says, yes, it's very important. Even a newborn child should hear Hasidut. Even a newborn child should learn these lessons. I have to tell you that I was in shock at the time, and I did it. And thank God my daughter, who was the baby at the time, grew up to be a very wonderful woman. And she's one of the emissaries in Europe. And I tell it to as many people as I can, because this was a message from her that even little children have to hear these holy words.
True. What an impact on, I mean, we know nowadays, even a baby in the stomach will hear, in utero will be affected by the music. Wow. That a mother listens to. Incredible. Wow. What a lesson. What a lesson. Such amazing lessons and such amazing stories. This was really so fascinating. You wanted to say something else?
I just wanted to say that the Rebbe told us how great she was. As if we didn't know, the Rebbe told us. After she passed away, the Rebbe spoke so many times about her greatness. And the Rebbe asked us that we should do things in her merit. And the Rebbe told us that the living should take to heart. We should think about her and try to emulate her. And the Rebbe did so many things that we should emulate her because she was a special woman. I think a lot of people know he started a campaign that we should celebrate our Jewish birthdays properly in her memory. He did it actually 33 days after she passed away was her 87th birthday. And on the day of his birthday, he started this campaign telling us that we should all know how to celebrate our Jewish birthdays, because that's it's like a Rosh Hashanah for each of us individually, just like we have a Rosh Hashanah for the whole world, but every person on the day they're born, it's like a Rosh Hashanah for them personally. It's a day for introspection. It's a day to think about how I can better my life. What can I do more in my life? And the Rebbe actually gave us many different traditions that we should do on the day of our birthday. And one of them was to make a gathering with friends and family, where a very joyous gathering where people should bless us on our birthday, and we in turn on our birthday should bless others, because we're told on the day of the birthday our luck, our mazal is brightened on that day, and we have the power to ask God for good wishes, and we have a power to bless other people on the day that our mazal is greater. So this is something that was started right 33 days after she passed away. And of course, so many people gave the name after Rebbitzen Chayanushka, they gave the name Chaya Mushka, and if they could not give the full name because somebody in the family had that same name, they would give a derivative, either just Chaya or Mushka, or like Esther Mushka, Rivka Mushka, whatever. And everybody wanted that name because she was so special. It's very interesting that when the Rebbe, after she passed away, the Rebbe spoke. It was 3 days after she passed away, and the Rebbe asked for people to make institutions, schools, funds, all kinds of things in her merit. And the very first one that started was a free loan association that called themselves Keren Chamesh. Chamesh were the 3 letters of her name, Chaya Mushka Schneerson, which would be the Chet, the Mem, and the Shin. And it was called Keren Chamesh. And the Rebbe spoke about it. And the Rebbe said, it's very unusual that when you make something on a name of a person who passes away, that you use the family name. Usually only use the first name because that's really the name that resonates with the soul. The family name very often changes. Most part of the time, a woman changes her name. The family name is not important. But in her case, I left the shin of Schneerson in the word Chamesh because in her case, her neshama name is Schneerson because she's the direct descendant of the first Rebbe of Lubavitch, who was called Schneer Zalman. And he was the first Rebbe, and the name Schneerson comes from that. So that's why he left the shin, saying that she is a Schneerson. It is part of her neshama name, just like Chaya and Mushka. So I thought that was very special to mention.
Very interesting. Right. Very interesting. So, you shared with us fabulous stories, such an incredible history and such amazing insights. What would you like people who are listening to this, what would you like them to leave from this interview?
Well, first of all, there's so much we can learn from her. She was a woman that really didn't want attention. She did a lot. There are a lot of things she did secretly. I know personally that she had a little secret, I don't even know how to call it. She called up when she heard that there was a family that the husband lost his job for some reason, or if she heard that somebody lost an apartment. She would call people that she was very close with and ask them, could you help me find a job for a man that's a bookkeeper, a man that, and she would silently work. She didn't want people to know about it. She didn't want the person who's receiving this job, who's getting this job, to even know that she was involved. And she had this little secret organization. She did so much quietly, and she didn't want people to know about it. So I think we can learn from her that we should be a little bit less haughty in our lives. I think we can learn from her that she was very devoted to people doing good things. She was so devoted to the people that were going out all over the world where they didn't know if they're going to have food the next week. They didn't know how they're going to manage. They had to send their children either away from home for education or what they're going to do for the education. And they just did it to help other Jews. And I think that she felt very strongly that that's a very important mission for all of us to do. And I remember my father telling me that when she was a young girl living in the city of Rostov, it was a time of hunger. And there was a yeshiva not far away from where they lived. It was not a Chabad yeshiva. It was not a Hasidic yeshiva. But she heard that there's very little food there, and she used to secretly bring food to them, and they never knew who it was that brought the food to them. But she felt bad that they don't have enough food. So I think we learned a lot of her just giving in a quiet way that nobody has to know about it. And I think we could all learn that. That's a very special trait. And just being devoted to the right ideals, being very devoted to the right ideals. And I think that we're living in a time that we know that being Jewish today is more important than ever. Being proud of being Jewish and upholding all the things, the schools and the institutions are so important, and we should put all our strength into helping those things, which of course she did.
Beautiful, really beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Sternberg, Rebbitzen Sternberg.
Mrs.
The shy girl certainly came out and has done tremendous things. So thank you so much for sharing this all with us and for your tremendous inspiration and stories. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Wow, that was such an incredible interview with Mrs. Sternberg. I feel like I was just given this behind the scenes glimpse into a different world and into privy to these incredible stories that are about such holy people and such amazing people, it really makes you think and makes you reevaluate different aspects of your life. I thought Mrs. Sternberg's message of what we should be trying to do in our own life was really incredible, based on the Rebbitzen, the humility and the just going about things without this fanfare and just doing what's right was really a message to take home. I was also particularly, touched by the story of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, how neither of them wanted the other person to feel any degree of hurt or pain in knowing they're suffering. And that really just shows you what true love is really all about, and what true caring and respect for another individual is really all about. So there was just so many nuggets of wisdom and such deep, really deep understanding on human beings and human nature, and how we can look at other people and how we can make people feel at home, and the incredible sensitivity that the Rebbitzen had to so many people, whether it was this Dr. Schuster or whether it was Mrs. Sternberg's future son-in-laws when they came to her home. Just this ability, this knack of really understanding people and understanding how people would feel, and just trying to empathize with that feeling and trying to make them feel more comfortable, I felt was just an incredible story for us to take into our own lives. There's just so many different aspects of it. I wonder what spoke to you, which part of these stories, this history, this different world kind of the history and the stories of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, and of course of Mrs. Sternberg's life, spoke to you in a way that can make an impact on you. I'd love to hear what parts affected you. Let us know in the comments below. We love to hear your comments. We love to hear how different interviews have impacted you or your life. If you enjoy listening to these interviews, please make sure that you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. You can find us on all podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. So take us on the go with you. Make sure you listen to us, give us a heart, give us a good rating. And we really, really appreciate hearing from you and hearing how and what you enjoyed about these interviews. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being part of this extraordinary community.